Hey guys, Fake Jordan here, also known as Skylar. Thanks for listening to the episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your podcatcher and YouTube.
And this is The Real Jordan. We are also on social media. Check us out on Facebook, X, and Instagram.
And if you want to be a supporting listener, check us out on Patreon, I said Patreon, that was weird. Patreon, where you can get ad-free and early episodes before they drop on the regular feed. You can also support us with Bitcoin or on PayPal.
And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts. That definitely helps us in the algos. And enjoy this one where we get into the fantastical, the bizarre, the weird world of the grandfather of the occult, John D.
He's my favorite.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it.
For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, against flesh and blood, against flesh.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
But against principalities, against powers, against powers, against powers.
Ideological subversion is a slow process which we call either ideological subversion or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality.
And against the rulers of the darkness of this age, the darkness of this age, the darkness of this age.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
You would be hard-pressed to find a single figure who's had more influence on the modern-day occult than the enigmatic mathematician and polymath, John Dee. Born to Welsh parents in London, his father, Roland, worked in the court of Henry VIII. And though they were not wealthy by 16th century standards, he and his family were probably better off than most. They certainly were connected to power, if even in a menial way. From a very young age, Dee exhibited huge intellectual promise, being admitted into St. John's College in Cambridge at age 15, going on to attain a bachelor's degree by age 19, after which he would continue his academic pursuits. The young student was rigorous in his studies and an insatiable learner. He even claimed to have studied 18 hours per day with 4 hours of sleep and 2 hours for resting and eating. Immediately after getting his degree at St. John's, he would become a fellow at Trinity College and take an interest in a wide variety of topics, from mathematics to navigation and astronomy to philosophy. He even took an interest in an eclectic crossover of theater and engineering when he designed a mechanical flying beetle for the play Aristophanes' Pax, allegedly wowing audiences who were convinced that the contraption was a living creature, earning him the early reputation as a magician. Early on, he was a savant, gaining renown in academic circles and in popular culture alike. He studied under top mathematicians and navigators of his day, even becoming an excellent cartographer in his own right. Skills which would greatly influence not only the Queen of England, but the history of Britain itself. The young upstart would go on to get a master's degree at Cambridge and was given guest lecture posts at universities across England and Europe. In Paris, his reputation so preceded him that he would even draw large crowds, quickly earning him prestige far beyond his years. Now, his intellectual pursuits, though impressive, were probably not the most interesting thing about him. He had a very keen interest in alchemy, reading horoscopes, and the occult. along with a strange constellation of theological beliefs. Though he kept these pursuits of his quiet for a time, whispers and rumors did abound. With his rising star and familial connection to the crown, he eventually landed a job as an advisor to Queen Elizabeth I. And this is where his story really gets interesting. The first Earl of Leicester, one Robert Dudley, was a Protestant aristocrat who was exceedingly talented in the game of politics. Growing up around power, he became a leading figure not only in Queen Elizabeth's court, but her Catholic predecessor, Queen Mary. In fact, he was a leading candidate to be wed to both Queen Mary and Elizabeth at one point in time. It was Robert Dudley who first began a correspondence with Dee, believing him to be a brilliant mind. Through the Earl, John was introduced to then Princess Elizabeth, where they would gain favor with her. The historical record on what precisely they advised her about during this period is unclear, but if one were to venture a guess, it would have had something to do with astrology and alchemy, which was considered heresy to the Catholic Queen Mary. On top of that, Dudley himself was conspiring to commit a coup to remove Mary from the throne and install his sister-in-law, Lady Jane Grey, who was married to his brother, Guildford. The plot was uncovered, and the Earl was summarily thrown into prison and given a death sentence for treason. Fortunately, he made a harrowing escape from his chains, going into exile for 5 years until Mary's death. But it was not just Dudley who was in the bad graces of the crown. John Dee, too, earned her ire. In 1555, he was arrested under suspicion of heresy for the practice of astrology and casting horoscopes. And though this was probably true, the arrest itself was most likely politically motivated, as Queen Mary was trying to expunge any perceived allies of her would-be usurper, Lady Grey. The Queen desperately tried to produce an offspring to be her heir, thus guaranteeing Catholic rule of England. But she was unable to do so before she became deathly ill in late 1557, and was forced to name her Protestant half-sister, Elizabeth, as successor. Mary soon passed, and the crown descended upon Elizabeth's head. One of her first orders of business as head of state was to bring Robert Dudley back into her court, and he brought John Dee with him. And it was here that Dee formed a very strong bond with the Queen, which was set in motion events which would be etched into his legacy, for better or worse. When Elizabeth ascended the throne, Dee's skills were quickly put to use. One of his earliest and most notable contributions was selecting an astrologically favorable date for her coronation, January 15, 1559. Commissioned likely through Dudley, Dee analyzed celestial alignments to ensure a propitious start to her reign. The success of this event, coupled with Elizabeth's interest in astrology as a tool of statecraft, established Dee as a trusted advisor early on. This moment marked the formal beginning of their relationship, though it was built on some prior history. Throughout his years in service to Elizabeth, he would become more outspoken about his alchemical and occult practices, even going so far as dedicating his occult tome called the Monas Hieroglyphica to Her Majesty. He was also placed in a position of influence over the British Navy, creating maps and calculations for important royal explorers Martin Frobisher and Humphrey Gilbert. It was in this role that Dee is credited with introducing the term British Empire into the modern lexicon. He strongly encouraged Mary to rapidly expand the kingdom's naval power so that it would exert its military and economic might against Europe and beyond. It truly was the dawn of an era where Britain would become the world's superpower, in large part thanks to John Dee. Now a royal advisor and respected member of Queen Elizabeth's court, Dee sought to uncover the secrets of the universe through both scientific and spiritual means. By the 1580s, his intellectual pursuits had increasingly turned towards the esoteric, driven by a desire to communicate with divine beings and recover the quote-unquote pure knowledge that he believed humanity had lost since the fall. In 1581, Dee began experimenting with scrying, using reflective surfaces like mirrors or crystal balls to see visions. After claiming to have had supernatural experiences, including an angelic visitation. To advance his work, Dee partnered with Edward Kelley, a younger man with a dubious reputation as an alchemist and medium. Kelley joined Dee in 1582 at his Mortlake home, acting as a scryer who would gaze into a crystal ball or a shoe stone and relay messages from spiritual entities. Dee meticulously recorded these sessions in his diary, believing the beings Kelley contacted were angels sent by God. Over several years, this collaboration produced the foundations of what is now called Enochian magic, named after the biblical figure Enoch, who was said to have walked with God and received divine revelations. The first major breakthrough came in 1583, when the angels, chiefly identified as Uriel, Gabriel, and others, allegedly delivered a complex system through Kelley's visions. This included a language, later called Enochian, and a series of calls or invocations to summon and communicate with celestial beings that he believed to have been the language Adam spoke prior to the Tower of Babel and the scattering of the tongues. The process intensified when Dee and Kelley traveled Europe, working in Poland and Bohemia under the patronage of figures like Emperor Rudolph II. Their sessions, often fraught with tension due to Kelley's erratic behavior, culminated in a vast body of material that Dee saw as a divine gift. Modern linguists, such as lifelong skeptic Donald Laycock and historian Deborah Harkness, commented on how impressive the Enochian language was. Its alphabet, grammar, and syntax were incredibly sophisticated, and has led many to wonder how John Dee and Edward Kelley could have simply created it all on their own. Harkness herself said of it,
"The Enochian language, with its strange words and elaborate calls, represents an intellectual achievement that integrates Dee's mathematical precision and theological aspirations into a form that is both alien and systematic."
Though perhaps not impossible, it does begin to stretch credulity when one considers the fact that Enochian was so vastly different from the languages with which both Dee and Kelley could speak and write in, that being English and Latin. Of course, as with much of the history of the court magician, one can only speculate on the source of the otherworldly tongue. Perhaps he legitimately received it through divine revelation, or it was just an immense genius which was able to create it ex nihilo. As he got older, his esoteric practices like scrying, alchemy, and horoscopes began to be all-consuming. He was obsessed with uncovering the hidden secrets of the universe. These pursuits led him and Kelley on a number of misadventures across Europe, in which Edward's true colors as a con man and swindler started to show. He eventually abandoned Dee, most likely because John could no longer financially support their occultic endeavors. And if money was not involved, Edward Kelley was not interested, a running theme throughout his documented life. But Dee nonetheless had a childlike naivete about his scrying partner. He seemed almost head over heels for him, hanging on his every word. John had even been scammed by so-called mediums prior to meeting Kelley, but this did not dissuade him from clutching to their relationship for dear life. What was it that so moved John Dee to be so infatuated with a man who, on the surface, seemed so obviously to be a con artist? Perhaps this is what makes stories like Dee's so perplexing yet intriguing. One can't help but wonder if there's some sort of legitimate gift that Kelley had, which was so undeniable that it made it impossible for John Dee to say no to him. Perhaps Kelley, like Dee, was a man of contradictions, who walked a fine line between fraudster and supernatural savant. To this day, John Dee is celebrated amongst practitioners of the occult, many of them still invoking his Enochian language and writings in their rituals. He has inspired authors like Neil Gaiman, who have written characters based on the real-life polymath. He figures heavily in much of the discourse surrounding the modern UFO, or rebranded UAP, phenomena, as well as prominent people who discuss other paranormal consciousness-type events. Ufologists like Jacques Vallée, Jeffrey Kripal, and Diana Pasulka invoke Dee extensively in reference to what can only be described as a Venn diagram of religion, the occult, UFOs, and other abnormal topics. The man not only innovated in the natural science and statecraft, but also in our understanding of the strange world of the supernatural. Hey everyone, sorry for this quick interruption. I just wanted to make you aware of how to connect with us and support the show if you enjoy our content. Make sure to subscribe to the Principalities and Powers podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. You can also follow Skylar or myself on x.com. All the links will be in the description of the show. Also, a big way to help us reach more people is to give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. We also have memberships available with bonus episodes and an ad-free listening experience. Again, all links will be in the description of the show. All right, let's get back into it. So John Dee is a very eccentric character.
Boy, is he ever.
To say the least. Kind of a folk hero in certain circles today, as we mentioned in the script, ranging from the occult to ufology. Lots of people are heavily influenced or reference John Dee in these topics. But it's kind of, I don't know, I thought it's very interesting and he's worth discussing. Now, John Dee's life kind of ended tragically.
Right.
He eventually returned to England, defeated and poor, kind of lost all his money with Edward Kelley. Even the last years of his life, he kind of lived as a hermit and didn't have that much influence, not nearly like what he did in his heyday. And Elizabeth had eventually died, and the new king that had taken over, which I think King James,
yeah.
He was not a big fan of John Dee or any of these occult practices, and he kind of wanted to expunge it. Though he did sort of turn a blind eye to John Dee. He was basically like,
Kind of gave him a pass because of his prior service, probably.
Exactly, yeah. And yeah, still some people looked up to John Dee, right? But yeah, he gave him a pass, but basically said, like, you're not going to be involved in any of this anymore, right? But yeah, I mean, things really went south for John Dee when he really started to pursue alchemy and this Enochian language full-time in Europe and tried to, like, sell it to other monarchs across Europe.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, basically, and that was kind of what he was doing. But I mean, I get the impression that he really believed it. Like, he really believed it. He was convinced.
Yeah, he was a true believer for sure. From what I can tell, anyways, from what I've read.
Yeah, and it is just a lot of people will think maybe John Dee just kind of turned into a con man and was like just trying to sell his services as an occultist or, astrologer, horoscope reader.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't think so.
Maybe. I think he did do some of that.
He probably did. Like, if you know something, you're going to try and sell it, probably.
Yes, but also he basically tried to sell his reputation because he was running out of money.
Right.
Especially in Europe. And he wasn't able...
socialite in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. And he wasn't able to, like, fund kind of his lavish lifestyle and experiments. And just another point on his lifestyle, too. So him and Edward Kelley did a little bit of wife swapping as well, because these Enochian entities had allegedly told Edward Kelley to do this, that this was what they were supposed to do. And John Dee and his wife weren't actually totally on board, but they did it anyways because they were so
sold on it.
So sold to Edward Kelley. Like, and this is the thing that just boggles my mind, how much they were sold to Edward Kelley, because Edward Kelley really was a con man. He had even had, like, his ears had been removed. And that was usually a punishment.
Clipped.
Yeah,
clipped at the top, not removed.
Excuse me. Clipped.
With freaking scissors.
Yeah.
Could you imagine? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, but that's like a punishment for being a swindler.
Yeah, for being a con man.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, like, but there must have been, like, here's the thing that I just can't get past me is a lot of people will just claim, well, John Dee was just, like, very naive and just sold a bill of goods to Edward Kelley. And is that totally true, though? Like, was there maybe something legitimate about what Edward Kelley was doing? Because it is hard for me to imagine a man who is behind the scenes of the rising world power, involved in political games.
Coined the term British Empire.
The British Empire. Like, got Queen Elizabeth to expand the British Navy to what would become the most powerful navy the world would ever know. Had all this foresight, had all this knowledge, had... not much of his mathematics that he had written about was taught as in schools as curriculum, and, like, he got swindled by Edward Kelley.
Yeah, seems a bit strange.
What?
Seems like there would have to be some substance from Kelley.
Exactly. That's my point. It seems like how could someone involved in politics not be that naive? Like, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Because politicians, if nothing else, are very shrewd characters and know how to wheel and deal and know how to lie to people and know how to read people when they're lying, right? Like, that you just have to be that if you want to be a politician or in power, connected to power in any way in the Queen's court. I just don't get it. Like, am I wrong here? It's a total head scratcher to me.
No, I don't think you're wrong. And I think as we go down this journey, I think we're going to find that a lot of so-called swindlers in this kind of area of the phenomena, where when it comes to paranormal ability, aren't actually as much of a scammer as people claim they are. That's what a name that comes to mind, which we're not going to do today, but would be Uri Geller, the famous spoon bending psychic,
telekinesis kind of thing.
Psychic, telekinetic. So he is basically debunked, I guess. If you Google him right now, he's still alive, by the way. If you Google him, he is basically known as like a fraud, as much as you can be a fraud as being a magician. I don't even know. Like, obviously there is sleight of hand going on if you're a freaking magician or an illusionist of any type. Obviously, like so calling them a fraud is kind of a weird misnomer, I think. It's like, would you go up to Chris Angel or any famous Las Vegas magician where they have a show every night and call them a fraud? You know that.
But I think the implicit understanding is that the audience knows that there's an illusion being committed, and the performer also, like, everyone is in agreement that this is an illusion.
Right, that it's a show.
Yeah, whereas like a Uri Geller isn't presenting himself that way.
Correct. So I believe he has been caught faking some stuff. But here's the weird thing. He's also been confirmed not faking stuff.
Interesting.
So, and that's kind of where I see. I actually like Uri Geller as a person. He's actually pretty cool dude. If you look into him, he's like pretty, really just a normal guy. He cares about his craft, what he's doing, but he's not out to like swindle you for billions of dollars or anything like that. Unlike Edward Kelley, who I get the feeling was, but I have the feeling just reading about him and researching this, that he knew he had something different and special, and so he capitalized on it, and it also included fakery as well.
Absolutely. And this is kind of a larger point that we will repeatedly hit in future episodes of this podcast, because it's sort of like the poisoned well of the paranormal, or the muddy waters. Is you have so much con artistry mixed in with legitimate unexplainable phenomena, and often from the same person.
Yes,
and
that's the hard part.
This is what throws everyone off. Is they cannot. As soon as one person is caught lying or faking something, everything they've done and do is immediately dismissed as in that same category, when it actually takes more intellectual work to actually examine each event or claim made on its own merits, as opposed to like just connect, well, this person had this one fake thing one time and then it never occurred again. And I'll give one quick example of this. So there's this guy in the evangelical Christian world. His name is Bob Hartley. And now a lot of people who are listening to this may not know who this guy is. Totally fine. However, in a very niche sort of professional evangelical charismatic Pentecostal Christian world, he's sort of prominent, and he's this prophetic guy who gives prophecies about people, sort of tells the future, blah blah blah. Well, anyways, he's kind of been exposed for doing all these fake prophecies. He had kind of been he'd been caught like looking up people's social media beforehand, and
before heading into a gig.
Before heading into a gig.
So
and then giving quote unquote prophetic words about them, right? Like
by telling them something about themselves when he didn't know them.
Yeah,
allegedly.
Exactly. And he'd been caught doing this like a ton, and also that's just the tip of the iceberg. There was like a lot more. Also, like a sexual abuse scandal and stuff like that.
Oh, geez,
very bad. Now, the interesting thing is the person who really blew the whistle on him was his son, and his son had blown the whistle on him and sort of exposed all his techniques, what he was doing. And I was listening to a podcast with his son getting interviewed. And what was interesting is he said, now, it's all true, but there was once in a while, my dad would, like, he gave this example of they went on an airplane on a flight and there's a woman sitting beside him and he gave her this like prophetic word that was like very specific to her and very true. And she like started crying on the plane and
Wow.
like he like read her mail, so to speak.
Crazy.
And he said, as far as I could tell, there's no way he could have known who she was, that she was going to be here, that he could have done his little con game on her.
Right.
He was like, but he just genuinely did it. And that's this tension. That's this tension with all of these characters.
Right.
Is like, and his son, who blew the whistle on him, who literally exposed
so
him,
crazy.
still acknowledged that there was these moments, these times
Where it was legitimate.
Yeah. And it's like, that's why it's so hard for us. It's like trying to hold water, you know. It's like it just keeps slipping out of your fingers. It's like you think you find something, but then it's like, oh, but there's all this like nonsense from that person, this con artistry.
I think there's probably the very human pressure to perform.
1000%.
And because
I was gonna get to this, but keep
okay.
going. Yeah, no, keep going.
And you can't, like, this isn't something that you can necessarily conjure on a whim. It's not really up to you.
Yeah, there's not an on-off switch that you can
Lots of people
necessarily-
tried to like put it. There's a lot of occult practices where and even Christian practices where people try to make it like that, where it could be a switch that, you know, I can just have it on or off, but it's not up to you. It's completely outside of you.
Yeah,
which is crazy.
And I think that is something we have to remember is perhaps guys like this Bob Hartley character, John Dee, Edward Kelley, they have these instances where they get some crazy revelation, experience that is unexplainable phenomena, but there's all this pressure, especially monetary pressure, to keep reproducing that thing. Because what happens, you build an entire career off that. Your livelihood depends on that now. So you have to constantly be producing that, churning out those results. And what happens when you can't do that anymore? Well, you're going to be tempted to make it up, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so that's where I suspect a lot of this mixture with the scams is with the real events, and why it then becomes so difficult to sort of get a grip on is because of this whole monetary pressure to keep reproducing.
And the power, we want to be able to harness this. Like, if you can like know something about someone, well, you better, like, I'm going to hire you now to do that for me. And it better be like every time at my beck and call, like, right.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, that's kind of just like a difficult thing that most people they cannot accept. It either has to be this person is
a fraud,
is
or
a total fraud, or they're totally legitimate. There can't be like the squishy middle ground, because I know that's a hard balance to walk.
Yeah.
It's like, and going back to John Dee, you know, even this whole Enochian language. Again, this is another thing that remains a topic of discussion, and how unbelievably impressive this language is. And linguistics experts have analyzed the Enochian language and been like, I don't know how they could have just made this up. Some of them say there perhaps is a more there's sort of a split from what I've seen among linguists, to be fair, that some of them say, oh, well, there is kind of a pattern where it could be made up, but it's still even the ones who think it is made up are like, think it's still very impressive, whereas there's others who don't think it could have been made up at all, right? So there is kind of like a debate about where this Enochian language came from, which John Dee and Edward Kelley would claim it came from the angels, Gabriel and Uriel.
I have a very interesting anecdote so the first time I ever heard of Enochian as a magic language was on a podcast that I like. It's called The Confessionals. And the very first episode I ever listened to, I think it was like episode 122. It's actually called that, like Enochian language. And it's this insane account from this guy who was in the military. And basically he's an escort for some kind of scientists. And there's some kind of down craft that they need to go and retrieve because it has sensitive information and technology on it. So they go and retrieve it. And so he is part of the retrieval team. Even though he's an escort, he also helps retrieve information. So they find this craft. He says it's like nothing he's ever seen before. It's some kind of esoteric technology. It's not a saucer or anything. It somewhat resembles something that we would have, but it's not real. But it's not. It's different. And he's on so there's computers set up in this thing, like we would normally have. And as he's retrieving data, he's on the computer, and it has all of these weird language marks on it, like like
symbols.
Yeah, symbols. The word that comes to mind is more like hieroglyphic, but like symbols and stuff, and
word pictures.
Yeah, word. Yeah, and they have a handbook, and he's looking through it to try and find, because he's familiar with a lot of different types of languages, and he's trying to find this language so that he can decipher it and then turn this thing off, get the hard drive out, etc., or whatever. One of the scientists walks up to him and he's like, "Stop looking in that book. You're not going to find it in there." And he's like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like, "This is Enochian." And he's like, "What's Enochian?" He's like, "It's a demon language."
Yeah.
And then that was it. And then the scientist took over, extracted the rest of it. So that's an anecdote. We don't know if it's true. I've listened to the episode multiple times. I think the guy is telling the truth. It's an insane story,
or telling the truth as he remembers it. Like,
So it's funny you mentioned that. I'm not going to give the whole episode away, but if you hear it, go to that Confessionals episode 122 or around there. It's the Enochian language one, and have a listen, because as you remember it plays into that entire episode, because there's way more to it than that.
Yeah, and on that note too, just Enochian itself is actually a recurring theme in modern paranormal lore.
Yeah.
Even it comes up in a lot of stories where they claim to read Enochian or hear Enochian or speak Enochian,
right?
What have you, and it all started with John Dee and Edward Kelley. That's kind of that's the dawn of it, the origins of it. And again, I don't know. You can go up online and read their all their transcripts right now and kind of have a look at it if you want. I've looked at some of it. It is like, just looks like it looks like gibberish to me. Like, I don't,
scribblings of a madman.
Yeah,
is
exactly.
What it looks like.
I don't understand it, but again, probably a professional linguist or someone like of that nature.
I'm sure if you took the time to understand it, you could.
Yeah, but from what I've read, it seems very impressive at the very least, if they just made it up or if they indeed received it through divine revelation, through another entity. But again, this thing about these entities interacting with the state and the powerful empires is disconcerting to me. Disconcerting that they have so much influence and power, and are also influencing, these sort of like large, very powerful empires, and that is just something for us to leave with and think about. Do we want people with that much influence speaking with entities that we have no way to test if these entities are malevolent or benevolent? We just have to take their word for it, and assume that it is so, and go from there. I don't know. It makes me extremely nervous when that is the case.
Yeah.
But
do you want to hear how Edward Kelley met his end, according to
let's end
Lord.
with this story. You tell us how Edward Kelley ended.
So Edward Kelley eventually goes to work for Emperor Rudolph. And what happens is he actually discovers the way to turn material into gold, allegedly. And what happens is he refuses to give Rudolph the recipe to do it, even though on demand he produces gold for him every time. So eventually Rudolph gets pissed off and throws him in prison because he won't tell him. So Kelley does a prison break. He gets a bunch of sheets, or so the story goes, and he rappels down this prison tower that he's in. But his sheets are too short, so he jumps the last 20 feet. Breaks his leg so bad that it had to be amputated. Now Rudolph took pity on him and said, okay, you can just go back to making gold, just go back to your life, we'll just go back to normal. So a few years go by and he still won't give the recipe to the emperor. Gets pissed off again, throws Kelley in jail again, and then Kelley does the same thing. Basically jumps from a window, breaks his other leg so badly that it had to be amputated. So now Kelley's rolling around, the only alchemist who's ever been able to transmute material into gold. Rolling around, miserable life, eventually dies because of these injuries, and that's it. And the funny thing is, with all his escapades between him and Dee and everything they've done, his only reason for not giving the emperor the recipe was because he thought that no man should have that much power as to make gold, which just sounds hilarious.
Thank you for that object lesson, Edward Kelley.
Yes. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. One of my favorite subjects to talk about is John Dee because it's just so weird. I'm still not even sure he's a real person, but let's keep going. Stay tuned for the next one. Check out all our links in the descript of the episode. And if you become a supporting member, you can get this episode extended and ad-free.